Let's call her Hannah. She's 30, a former scholarship student who married into the wealthy Kara family, a high society dynasty in New York known for their business empire and ruthless ambition. Hannah grew up as the daughter of an ethics professor, raised on values of justice and integrity. But in the Kara family, she was always an outsider, the poor girl who'd never belong. For 3 years, she endured subtle jabs from her sister-in-law, Bianca, Victor's viciously perfect sister, who thrived on control and cruelty. Bianca's upcoming wedding to Alexander Hartley, heir to another business dynasty, was set to be the social event of the year, a merger of two family empires disguised as a marriage. But at the rehearsal dinner in an exclusive Manhattan restaurant, Bianca's cruelty reached a new low. Hannah arrived to find no place setting for her. Bianca smirked from the head table, her voice dripping with venom. "Oh, darling," she purred, "we only reserve seats for important guests." The groom's aristocratic family tittered, and Victor, Hannah's husband, shrugged. "Don't make a scene, Hannah," he whispered. She didn't. She excused herself to freshen up. But in that moment, she set the timer on Bianca's downfall. 2 months earlier, at the annual Starlight Gala, a charity event for children's cancer research, Hannah had seen the first crack in the Kara family's foundation. The gala, held in a glittering New York ballroom, was the pinnacle of high society, where deals were sealed over dessert and reputations made or broken with a whisper. Damien Lambert, a 65-year-old self-made billionaire, stood at the center, his quiet dignity a stark contrast to Hannah's father-in-law, Nathaniel Kara, who'd inherited his wealth and multiplied it through connections. Bianca, in a crimson gown, raised her champagne glass for a toast, her voice carrying across the marble floor. "Todamen," she said, her smile fooling everyone but those who knew her. "The lighting is particularly flattering tonight. Damen." It almost disguises that shiny head of yours. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. "What did they call you in the Tribune profile last month?" She continued, twirling her expensively highlighted hair. "The bald eagle of business. Though I've always thought vulture might be more accurate, considering how you circled the Wilcox merger." The laughter stopped. Damen's recent acquisition had been controversial but legal, and several Wilcox investors were in the room. Hannah watched the color drain from Nathaniel's face as Bianca destroyed a years-long business relationship in seconds. "Bianca," Hannah whispered, stepping toward her. "That's enough." Bianca ignored her, as always. Victor's insignificant wife, the outsider who'd never belong. Nathaniel crossed the room, gripping Bianca's elbow. "My apologies, Damen," he said loudly. "My daughter's sense of humor sometimes exceeds her sense of propriety." Bianca smiled, her eyes cold. "Of course not," she said, her apology a lie. She'd meant every word. A petty revenge for Damen declining her pitch to head his foundation's marketing division. Damen's response was glacial. "No offense taken, Miss Kara. Though I'd be careful about birds of prey analogies. Even vultures serve a purpose in nature's hierarchy." The orchestra played to fill the silence, but Hannah saw the steel in Damen's gaze. Cold, calculating, dangerous. This wasn't just a social misstep, it was business suicide. Victor appeared at her side, oblivious. "Everything okay?" he asked cheerfully. "Fine." Hannah led, her mind racing. Outside on the terrace, Zoe Lambert, Damon's daughter and Hannah's closest friend in this world of sharks, pulled her aside. Unlike other trust fund kids, Zoe had worked her way up in her father's company, starting in the mailroom. "He'll never forgive her," Zoe whispered. "Dad's been looking for an exit strategy from your in-laws' business for months. This merger with the Hartleys that Nathaniel keeps bragging about. It's built on sand. The only reason Dad hasn't pulled out is the history between our families." Hannah filed the information away like a loaded weapon. For 3 years, she'd endured Bianca's cruelty, the jabs, the dismissals. The time Bianca accidentally spilled red wine on her white dress at a Christmas party, laughing as Hannah scrubbed it with club soda. Now, she had the key to Bianca's destruction. The engagement party a week later confirmed Hannah's suspicions, held at the Kara family estate, a sprawling mansion with manicured gardens. The event was a display of wealth and strategy. Bianca, in a blush pink gown, held court, her 10-carat diamond ring catching the light. Alexander Hartley stood behind her, glued to his phone, looking miserable. They look thrilled, Hannah murmured to Zoe. Ecstatic. Zoe replied, about the stock options. The prenup took longer than their courtship. Nathaniel toasted to new beginnings, his gaze on the business associates, not the couple. Hannah noticed Mr. Hartley Sr. sweating, despite the air conditioning, whispering urgently to an associate. Don't care what we have to liquidate, he hissed. Just keep it quiet until after the merger announcement next week. She sipped her champagne, filing away another piece of the puzzle. That night, Victor's carefree demeanor vanished. If the Hartley deal falls through, he admitted, gripping the steering wheel, Dad's leveraged everything on this. The wedding, the merger, the expansion plans. One domino falls. They all fall. Hannah placed a hand on his. I'm sure it'll work out, she said. But she knew it wouldn't. Not if she had anything to do with it. The night before the rehearsal dinner, Zoe called at midnight. Dad's reached his breaking point with the Caras, she said, her voice tight with excitement. He's liquidating all shares in their joint ventures tomorrow afternoon. The market will react immediately. Once Dad pulls out, the Hartley merger collapses. Hannah closed her eyes, visualizing the timing. The rehearsal dinner was tomorrow night. What unfortunate timing, Zoe said, feigning innocence. After hanging up, Hannah sat in her darkened office, possibilities unfolding like a chess match. 3 years of patience, of watching Bianca crush anyone in her way, had led to this moment. She called Damen. Zoe mentioned, you're planning some business changes tomorrow, she said carefully. What if you moved your timeline up to tonight, during the rehearsal dinner? Damen's low chuckle held no humor. You've always seen more than others give you credit for, haven't you? Hannah, I observe, she replied. And now you want to act. Justice delayed is justice denied. Isn't that what they say? Why now, after all this time? He asked. She thought of Bianca's smirk. The years of humiliation. I believe in perfect timing, she said, ending the call. The quiet hum of anticipation buzzed beneath her skin. At the rehearsal dinner, Hannah wore a midnight blue gown, her makeup subtle. Tonight, she was the observer, the invisible catalyst, the venue, an exclusive restaurant overlooking the Manhattan skyline, glittered with crystal chandeliers. Bianca had arranged the seating with precision, placing Hannah between 2 elderly aunts at the furthest table. I'll have them fix it, Victor offered, but Hannah smiled. I'm happy where I am. Her position gave her the perfect vantage point. She checked her watch. Damen had confirmed his team had liquidated the shares over the past 18 hours, and financial news outlets were alerted to break the story at 8. Right as Nathaniel would give his speech, the first course arrived, but Hannah barely tasted it. Her eyes on Bianca, who preened in a silver-sheath dress, a diamond necklace catching the light. Atzel, Nathaniel Rose, champagne glass in hand, distinguished guests, beloved family, he began. We gather tonight on the eve of a momentous occasion. Not just the union of 2 people, but the joining of 2 great legacies. His phone buzzed. He frowned, silencing it. As I was saying, a future of unprecedented opportunity. Phones across the room chimed, a discordant symphony drowning out his words. Mr. Hartley Sr. checked his device, his face ashen. Nathaniel, he interrupted. The stock. Nathaniel's phone rang again. A critical business line. One moment, he said, stepping into the corridor. Through the glass partition, Hannah watched Nathaniel's expression transform. Disbelief, rage, a sculpture cracking from within. He reappeared, shouting into his phone. What do you mean he's withdrawn? He screamed, the glass in his hand shattering on the floor. The announcement is Monday. The name Lambert rippled through the room. Cara Industries plummets. 43% in after-hours trading. Someone read aloud. Lambert Enterprises severs all ties with Cara Industries, effective immediately. Another voice added. Hartley Global expected to withdraw from merger talks. Mr. Hartley Sr. swayed, collapsing face first into his chocolate souffle. Chaos erupted. Waiters rushed to his aid. Associates called brokers. The orchestra played a somber melody. Bianca stood frozen, clutching her necklace, Realization. Dawning. The wedding, she whispered. Then louder. What about the wedding? Alexander was already on his phone, barking orders to his team. His back to her. She lunged at Victor, her nails digging into his arm. Do something, she screamed. Fix it. Victor looked helpless. If Lambert's pulled out, I don't care what he's done, she shrieked. Hannah remained in her seat, lifting her wine glass, her eyes meeting Bianca's across the chaos. One wild with desperation, the other steady with satisfaction. By midnight, the restaurant had emptied. The Hartleys left, Alexander trailing behind. Without a goodbye to Bianca, associates melted away, distancing themselves from the imploding Cara empire. The wedding was cancelled. At the Cara estate, now a funeral parlor of floral arrangements, Bianca sat in her room, surrounded by gifts that would be returned, her designer gown mocking her in its ivory splendor. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but Hannah knew she wasn't crying for love. She was crying for the empire she'd lost. Are you happy now? Bianca whispered, her voice hollow. I saw you last night. You enjoyed every second. Hannah leaned against the doorframe. Some truths didn't need to be spoken to be understood. She left without responding. In the hallway, Victor looked like he hadn't slept. Dad's been on the phone with Damon Lambert all night, he said. He won't budge. Downstairs, Nathaniel's temper found an outlet. The sound of shattering glass echoed. The stock's down 62%. Victor continued. The press is calling it Black Friday, even though it's Tuesday. We're ruined. Hannah. She placed a hand on his arm. Not ruined. Changed. You knew this would happen, he said, his eyes searching hers. Not the scale of it. She replied carefully. But you knew something. After a long moment, a strange expression crossed his face. Not anger, but respect. Remind me never to underestimate you, he said quietly. The next week was a slow-motion car crash. Investors sued. The board forced Nathaniel to resign. The family's private jet was seized mid-flight. Bianca's social death was swift. Friends stopped calling. Invitations dried up. Her social media became a ghost town. 10 days later, at the family lawyer's office, the attorney outlined their options. The Manhattan apartment must be sold, he said, as well as the Hamptons property and the Napa vineyard. Bianca slammed her palm on the table. What about my jewelry collection? It's insured for $2 million. The lawyer cleared his throat. Most of your collection was purchased with corporate funds. Those items have been inventoried for liquidation. When they left, Bianca was still arguing. Victor turned to Hannah in the elevator. Will you stay with me now that? He gestured vaguely. Do you think I married you for your money? She asked. I wouldn't blame you if you had, he said, his smile sad. I'm not everyone else, she replied. She hadn't married him for love at first, but for his kindness in a cruel family. Now, watching him face their downfall with dignity, she realized her love had deepened. 2 days later, Zoe invited Hannah to lunch. To the architect of the most elegant revenge I've ever witnessed. Zoe toasted. She handed Hannah a velvet pouch. Inside were South Sea pearls Bianca had worn to Hannah's wedding, mocking her modest diamond pendant. They were part of the asset seizure. Zoe said, her smile wicked, a trophy for the real winner. They laughed. But Hannah's felt hollow. Revenge didn't erase the years of slights. It balanced the scales, but the wounds remained. That evening, Hannah visited the Cara estate one last time. In the master suite, the safe was empty except for a few pieces of Nathaniel's jewelry. A diamond tennis bracelet, sapphire earrings, an emerald pendant. Bianca had flaunted. With the movers distracted, Hannah slipped them into her purse. That night, she made an anonymous donation to the Children's Cancer Charity that hosted the gala, specifying the jewelry be auctioned at their next fundraiser. The irony was delicious. Bianca's symbols of status would fund the cause she'd used as a backdrop for her social climbing. 3 weeks later, Hannah and Victor moved into a modest Brooklyn brownstone. It needed work, but sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the empty rooms with promise. Victor took a teaching position at a business school, his eyes lighting up as he described shaping young minds without his father's shadow. A month later, Nathaniel visited, a changed man in khakis and a simple shirt, his luxury watch gone. I owe you an apology, Hannah, he said over coffee. When Victor brought you home, I saw you as beneath us. I was wrong. You saw us clearly. Bianca. Especially. How is she? Hannah asked. Struggling, he said. Her cousin Marcus offered her a teaching position at a finishing school in Switzerland. He laughed without humor. Bianca. Teaching etiquette. The irony isn't lost on me. I indulged her too much after her mother died, thinking it would make up for what she'd lost. Yes, Hannah agreed simply. You did. They finished their coffee in silence. And when he left, his shoulders seemed straighter, unburdened by pretense. That night, Victor returned home, smelling of chalk dust, dead. Told me something interesting, he said, sitting beside her. Damon Lambert approached him 2 years ago about splitting their ventures amicably. Dad refused, tried to leverage the partnership for more control. Lambert mentioned concerns about how Bianca treated you at family functions, said, it reminded him of how his late wife was treated by her in-laws. Hannah kept her expression neutral. Dad thought it was a tactic. Victor continued, tracing her cheekbone. But now he wonders if Lambert was waiting for the right moment, or the right person, to sever ties. You didn't just make a phone call that night, did you? You've been playing a longer game. Does it matter now? She asked softly. No, he said, except I'm realizing I never really knew you. You're terrifying, and I love you for it. He kissed her, and something shifted. The last pretenses falling away, leaving something raw and honest. Their marriage, built on convenience, had transformed through crisis into something deeper. The next morning, a courier delivered a package from Damon. A vintage fountain pen with a note. This pen belonged to my father, who taught me that true power comes from patience and precision. You remind me of him. Your father would be proud. Coming from Damon, a man of restraint, it was the highest praise. Hannah's father would have been conflicted about her methods, but understood the justice at their core. 8 months later, Hannah and Victor launched Horizon Partners, a small firm focused on sustainable investments. With Damon's strategic support, they leased a modest office, hired a team that valued innovation over intimidation, and built relationships with clients who shared their vision. Nathaniel, humbled but resilient, started a one-man consultancy, earning respect through competence, not connections. Bianca, in Switzerland, was teaching etiquette, a glorified exile. A year after the Cara collapse, Zoe became CEO of Lambert Enterprises, marrying for love, not leverage. At her wedding in the Metropolitan Museum's sculpture garden, Hannah stood with her, reflecting on their journey. Karma doesn't forget addresses, Hannah whispered. An old saying of her father's. Zoe squeezed her hand. Neither do friends. As Hannah danced with Victor under the moonlight, the past was behind them, the future bright with possibility. A path they'd forged together, illuminated, and entirely their own. Hannah's story shows what happens when years of humiliation meet calculated justice. She brought down an empire built on lies, finding closure in the chaos. Sometimes, the smallest slights spark the greatest reckonings. What do you think? Was Hannah's revenge justified? Or did she go too far? Have you ever waited for the perfect moment to balance the scales? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. These stories connect us, showing us we're not alone in our struggles. If you enjoyed this tale, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out. I'm here every day with new tales from Reddit and beyond. So stick around. See you next time.